All right, welcome to episode 16 of the PoddyC. This week we got revealed last week 12 new hero talent trees, so we now have the majority of the hero talent trees that are going to be available next expansion, and we figured this would be a good episode to kind of talk about how they're looking so far, and I guess concerns, things we're excited about with them, specific trees that we think exemplify the good and bad things, but I don't know. I guess overall, I've gotten through. I've made videos of most of these so far, and the ones I haven't, I plan to soon. I think my impression of like most of them has been pretty positive. Like I see what they're trying to do. They're not adding new buttons. They're not bloating stuff out. And usually, it seems like they promise a little twist to your gameplay that's not going to punish you too much if you don't play into it too much. So, at least on my end, I don't know. I've been feeling this weird kind of way about hero talents, where it's like, is this do we really need this? Slash, is this really like the system they should be investing the dev time into? Right? Like, are we getting game improved out of this investment for most of these trees? And that I'm still not sure about. But the specific trees, I've been pretty happy about. Like most of them, I think there've been a few outliers. Obviously, there was the Oracle one that they reworked or are reworking, but aside from a few others, like I don't know. Most, I would say I was reasonably excited. At least for every spec, it seems like they have one or more that I'm excited to play.
Yeah, I like generally agree. I feel like there are a lot of really cool trees in the hero talents, but I have also very similar concerns. I'm like super mixed on this whole hero talent system. Because like on one hand, I think it's really cool that some of the trees exemplify my class fantasy. Like Druid, for example. Druid was one of the first classes I've made in this game, and I really like the idea of shapeshifting. Like that's what really drew me into playing Druid to begin with. And the whole Druid of the Claw talent tree, like that was really cool. I'm like, holy crap, I can actually play something that like would maybe start shapeshifting. Because part of like the problem with Druid that I've had for the longest time playing this game is you don't really utilize the whole shapeshifting aspect of Druid.
Mm.
Like maybe in PvP more, but it's really not much of a thing. Like if you're a boomkin, you're kind of just a boomkin, right? Like you're just a goddamn owl. You're going around, you're shooting stuff, and that's it. And if you're a bear tank, you're just a bear, right? But I kind of want something that like is really class defining and it really like changes my gameplay and play style. But at the same time, like my competitive side feels like there's no way this would work out because how the hell are they gonna really balance a game when you have these like super class defining changing builds or like talents. It's like something that I think about when I'm playing an ARPG. Like in ARPGs, they're not really balanced, but they're cool as hell. You know how like if you play a specific build, like say if you're a necromancer and you like you've got like an army of stuff, it's like super cool, but like they're generally not very balanced, and that's like something that I worry about when it comes to retail WoW.
I think I don't think they're at it. I don't know. Like I feel like it was probably a tremendously harder task to like going into Dragonflight, being like, all right, we're gonna make all these new class and spec trees, and now we're gonna balance this throughout the expansion. They kind of showed throughout the beginning that they're willing to do that. And they did a ton. I mean, they've done very little as of recent because clearly they're working the expansion. But like at the beginning, they were really pumping out changes, and I feel like this expansion was relatively pretty balanced. Like actually, I want to say for the majority of this expansion, it's actually been like maybe the most balanced this game's ever been. And I feel like their biggest challenge they've ever had to balance was these trees they just came out with. So I'm not super worried about it. Not to mention that if you notice, there's in every one of these hero talent trees, there's like usually a node, and you seem like you think it's kind of boring. And you're like, oh well, why is that there? It just increases the damage of this and the crit damage of this by whatever percent. But those are also tuning knobs, and I think they're very specifically abilities that they want that specific hero spec to be really strong, and that is the thing they can tune up and down to kind of bring these things more in line with each other. But I was actually not sold on these initially. It was actually until I think this week until I was really sold on it, because I kind of felt the same way as everyone else, where it was like, okay, at the bottom of your talent tree, there's just going to be like they would just add rows, but that would go against the evergreen nature. And this is just a different way to do that. And it's going to multiple to pick from each class. And this kind of changed my mind because I think the theme actually hits so deep that they're killing it. That it is not across the board. It's not on all of them. But I mean, you read like Rider of the Apocalypse, or you read Templar, you read Scale Commander, you read Herald of the Sun, you read Spellslinger, you read Druid of the Claw, you read Diabolist, Mountain Thane. All these things are like really sick, and we haven't seen the animations, but a lot of the animations for these things are probably going to look really sick. And I was like convinced this week, and this is the total opposite of the way that I play the game, but like I know that there are people that are Death Knights that are fucking losing their mind, ready to play the expansion because they want to play Rider of the Apocalypse, right? Like I think they hit they found a way to add talent that rose to our spec tree while also making people pog out in bat chest about these cool ideas within their class. I think they're doing really well, and I'm not really worried about the tuning because, like, I don't know, I would have been worried about tuning this expansion. And you can always just tuning is like an effort thing. Like you can have as many million cogs in the wheel in every class, and if they just spend time on it like they did this expansion, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
but that's like sort of the thing, though. Like, 'cause, like some of them have more knobs and some of them don't have as many knobs, right? Like we were talking about how Rider of the Apocalypse and Templar, and some of them are like super cool, but at the same time, like, some of them are not as exciting, right? Which don't change as much. Like the Blood Decay ones, for example, I was looking at a little bit of the Blood Decay ones, and they really don't change the spec all too much,
Yeah.
which probably like makes it a lot easier to balance. But at the same time, like something that changes your spec a whole lot more is probably much more difficult to
Well,
deal
I
with,
mean,
especially when you have like so many more of these trees to go around.
you're gonna see a Warcraft logs thing at the end of the day, and it's like if this thing is that far ahead, then you can tune something down, whether it's like the power of it or hopefully not the gameplay. The thing is that I was thinking of that too, is some of them are super transformative and some of them make you feel like there's not a lot going on, but then there's also classes that don't need much more on anyway. And there's some classes that do have room for that, and they kind of went in that direction. So like a Red Paladin has Herald of the Sun and Templar, two very distinct, extremely different play styles. Seems like, I mean, they're two of the best in the game in my opinion. But Rhett has room to do that, where maybe, I don't know, like there's probably a good example of a class for this where like you wouldn't want it actually to do that much and you kind of just want the theme out of it. But that being said, some of them are really, really good and some of them are really bad. I don't know if it's like as clear cut as like a spec thing as much as some of these really, really stink and some of them are unbelievably good. Like the really good ones recently definitely convinced me that this is a good idea, and I hope they flesh out more of these throughout the process or the beta process.
there's definitely some clever stuff they've done with them as well to minimize the like exponential complexity that was a risk with them. Like the fact that you just take all the points instead of some of them hugely
Oh, that would be
reduces the amount of
smart. Yeah.
combinations, right? Like they don't have to worry about balancing. They know you're going to take all the points. For many of the trees, all of the throughput, like none of them are on choice nodes as well. Many of the trees, choice nodes are just utility. A few of them, there are throughput choices, but usually it's like there's kind of like an easy playstyle one and a hard playstyle one, and like probably the hard playstyle one is going to be more DPS overall, or maybe it's not. But either way, it's not adding like too much to balance. So I think that like you said, it'll be pretty easy for them to balance if they're willing to go into like those crit damage nodes. The thing that I'm a little bit worried about is, these hero talent trees serve as 2 specs each, and I guess you can balance like the arcane. So like say the one that's shared by Frost and Arcane mages, right? Like if that hero talent tree is like broken on Arcane and bad on Frost, I guess you have some knobs that elegantly nerf that for just Arcane, but it's not the crit damage and crit strike chance node, right? Like you can't just tune that down because you're going to nerf Frost as well as Arcane, so you have to instead like nerf. But they could just nerf the coefficient of the Arcane splinters only instead of the Frost splinters. So like they do have ways to do that. I don't think that they can actually do it with those simple like 10% crit chance nodes unless they're willing to make those be like 10% crit for Frost, 8% for Arcane, which I don't think they are. I think that is a degree too far for them to do unless they really have to.
Yeah, that is actually a good point, because they have been tuning these specific nodes that are shared by two specs separately, right?
Yeah, and that's another issue I guess I have with some of the hero talent trees. Like if you read the Conduit of the Celestials one, which is the shared one for Windwalker and Mistweaver, basically every node is like, here's what I do if I'm a Windwalker, and here's what I do if I'm a Mistweaver. And like there's a little bit of thematic connection, but it's like spend 30 chi for this as a Windwalker, and it affects this ability to do this. Or if you're a Mistweaver, spend 8 Shaylun's Gift, and it affects this ability, which does healing instead of damage or whatever. And it's like, okay, I can see how there's a thematic link here, but it's not really one hero talent tree at that point. Like, it's two, right? You've got the Windwalker version and the Mistweaver version, which are every node functions differently.
Well, that's actually really interesting because I've been in talking about these with my chat a lot, and we're kind of like keeping like a power rankings of them, of like how much people like them. Power kind of taken out of it because that can be changed instantly. It's more like cool idea, cool design, fun gameplay, good synergies, stuff like that. Not a lot of throwaway nodes. Conduit of the Celestials is the only one so far. Almost every class or every spec has like agreed with the other spec on their thing. It's been like, I mean, within one ranking tier, maybe at the most. Conduit of the Celestials I have ranked directly in the middle, and it is a really, really bad tree for Windwalker and an amazing tree for Mistweaver. Mistweavers, it was made for them. It's super perfect, and Windwalkers, it's like they were just thrown in there, and it's the only one like that. There's not a single other spec that's like that.
Yeah, it's tough as well because the monk, like one of the nodes is like, hey, here's some haste. Actually, two of the nodes in that tree are like, hey, here's some haste. Which,
yeah.
If you've ever played Windwalker, somebody giving you haste is like socks for Christmas. Actually, socks for Christmas kind of own.
Okay.
But,
can we talk about that actually?
Yeah.
That when we were kids, I swear when other people got socks for Christmas, that was like coal.
Yeah.
That was like you did something wrong in the year to have this happen to you, and I feel like it is an S tier Christmas gift to get
100%.
Nice socks. As an adult, just wanted to shout out Christmas, but yeah,
you guys still get Christmas gifts? Actually feels like it's been a long ass time.
I didn't get, I got like 2 this year. It was bad.
Holy.
Yeah, I wasn't even bad this year either. I just think like RNG fell that way.
Yeah,
right.
I get gifts from my parents, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, parents, girlfriend, and then we're chilling. Like friends, like adult male friends don't like get each other Christmas gifts.
Yeah.
Well, we're changing that this year. You guys are sending me your addresses, and we're
beautiful.
Expect a big surprise.
Sounds good.
We can all say our addresses on here, and then everyone can be a part of it.
Dude, we're getting so many gifts then. Holy moly.
Yeah,
actually,
nothing bad will happen from that either.
You guys want a little bit of lore as well? Frank isn't here with us today helping us record because he's got a doctor's appointment in a few hours or something, so he's gone to bed to be slept up for that. We're recording late. But that means we could sneak some like dangerous stuff in here that he really should edit out and see if he actually watches all the way through, or if he's kind of skimming.
Just do like we start with like 5 minutes of hero talents, and then we just riff on Christmas for like 50 minutes, and then end with like the Patreon question, and he's just skimming, and he's like, "Yeah, it seems good." Throws it live.
I'm pretty sure he does watch like almost the whole thing because he always does these chapters. I don't know if you've looked at the YouTube uploads, but he does these like really precise chapters all through the videos, so I think he probably will hear this. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, he does do that. Also, I've heard a lot of people that are very, very fond of that. The YouTube chatters are definitely big fans of being able to skip through, because like, and we know the listeners, like the last month or so, like the MDI was going on, there's multiple weekends of it. Like we find that super interesting, but maybe some of you guys don't. And that's fine. In the podcast apps, you can see a description that has like the time, and you can skip past the MDI stuff, or if you want to specifically listen to that, right? Or if maybe some people, Patreon questions are really great. I know, like if I don't really like if I'm listening to a podcast, and I'm not super down with everything they're talking about today, I can always be down for the Patreon question, right? Like those are pretty often very good. So make sure to utilize those and check out the YouTube timestamps. I wanted to ask you guys a few questions about hero talents, but number one, I just want to ask what is your all's favorite one so far, if you have one?
I think it has to be Druid of the Claw. I mean, Massive Attack is a banger name. They're probably gonna change it, but
I hope they don't change it.
Like, I really want it to be more shape-shifting. I think that would be so cool. Like, I think a Druid spec with like, the whole like shape-shifting aspect is cool as hell, but I don't know how they're gonna implement that.
You're a Guardian Druid, and I'm surprised they didn't do this earlier. To me, tanking in this game, every tank kind of has their thing. Like Prot Warriors are like, if there's just auto swings and not a lot of magic or bleed damage, they're always going to have the most damage reduction. DKs have mass grip, magic damage, it's great. Vengeance Demon Hunters are pretty much like that. They have like a better raid buff, but they have also grip and like sigils and stuff. Paladins have like off healing and a bunch of support. It's like a very specific kind of play style when you play a paladin that other tanks can't do. And Guardian Druids haven't ever felt like they have anything. They are
they're just a bear.
The tank that is so reliant on just being tuned extremely well, and they were recently, but like you don't see that being used. And like they're the only tank that can shapeshift. Like why on earth is a Guardian Druid like in raid when you're off tanking not #1 DPS? Because they can, not when they're tanking, but like that's a way to make them stand out. They can do something different. They can shift into cat, and then there you go. They made an entire tree where hopefully you can do stuff like that. So I definitely was a huge fan of that.
Yeah, I like Druid of the Claw as well. I think that when I was reading it as well, I was thinking, wow, there's going to be some keys where Dorki has like 80% cat form uptime because you can just keep your Iron Furs, right? 80% of your bear armor and health.
Oh, wow.
Like, you just tank in cat form if it's not too scary of a pull, right?
I don't know how realistic it
That
is.
sounds
We'd have to see it in practice.
I mean,
sounds
you
so
keep
sketchy.
80% of the armor and health of bear form, and you keep your Iron Fur.
It's also like, would it even be worth it? That's like
that is the question. Like, are you and is the AoE actually good? I hope it is. Like, I think that's always been something they've done badly with Druid is that, like you said, shifting just hasn't actually. The risk has been there, but the reward hasn't been there for shifting into damage forms as a bear. But yeah, I think that's a good one. I would shout out. I think Rider of the Apocalypse is his talent tree. Where as a Blood DK main this tier, I'm so sad that Rider of the Apocalypse is Unholy and Frost.
Not for blood. Yeah.
You just look at it, you're like, oh my god, I wish that was me. But I play all the tanks depending on the tier, so I think each tank has a pretty good one so far as well. Like Shadow Pan looks kind of sick for Brew. Eldrachi Reaver. I actually think Eldrachi Reaver looks pretty fun for Havoc. I'm not sold on it for Vengeance, but I think there is you can do this thing where you set up and empower a Spirit Bomb. That might be kind of fun. Do like a Giga Damage Spirit Bomb.
Dookie.
Yeah.
I think Eldrachi Reaver was just like Conduit of the Celestials, where they very clearly made it for Havoc and just threw Vengeance in there. Yeah.
Which is weird because Eldrachi, flavor-wise, that's the Vengeance
tanky.
one.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah, I guess for every spec that I play a lot of, if there's been 2 hero talent trees revealed, there's at least one that I'm 8 out of 10 excited for or better, which is pretty good. Like that is much better than I was expecting. Especially, I feel like some of the first ones they revealed were pretty underwhelming. So I think they've been ramping here with some of these later reveals, and the fact that they are going to rework Oracle as well has instilled in me quite a bit of hope. Because
me too. Yeah,
that's the kind of thing where like old Blizzard would have just kept it and they would have shoved it at us.
Yeah, like it reminds me of the beginning of Dragonflight Alpha. You guys remember when they first released all the talent trees, and the beginning ones were like the early trees were kind of lame and not too exciting, and then like the trees that came later on were like getting
way
better and better.
Yeah, they had all these like 3-point nodes as well, and they pretty much did away with all of those. And
yeah,
it was a group project.
I mean, some of them are still kind of bad. Like the Druid class tree, for example, right now is still pretty terrible, and they haven't really that was like one of the first ones they released, and they did remake it a bit, but they haven't touched too much on it. So I do hope if they do see more changes to the early released ones. Yeah,
we're going. Or sorry, good.
No, you just go ahead. I forgot what I was gonna say.
Okay, so I think these talent trees right now, we don't know what alpha and beta looks like right now. I think they look way different than what they do right now, because you can almost tell in the way that they've designed some of these hero talent trees that the way that your class is doing damage is going to change a lot. You can tell that certain talents are going to be in certain positions, and they've even in dev notes have kind of only had to clarify what they've had to so far, only because it conflicts with the information that you're getting on these trees. For example, the Death and Decay change that was dev noted. There was a bunch for Warrior. There was I'm trying to recall all of them. There was like 12 of them the other day, but like they are. They've dev noted some pretty major changes, and I can only imagine there's just a lot more. And I wish someone made a spreadsheet that just showed every class and spec tree in the game. It's just like listed, and it's red if it came out before Dragonflight and hasn't been updated since, and then it's like some kind of different yellow or green based on if it has been like touched once or twice like since then, and the ones that are green and yellow are like 5 times better. It's a group project. There's not like a DK guy that just makes the DK thing alone, right? Like they all work on this stuff. So it was very obvious, just like you said, they were better. And were you saying you thought that you think like these are getting better with time too? Like they're getting, after seeing some initial impressions of these, they're releasing 12 at a time. So they're chewing through these pretty quick, right? Like they're making these fast, or at least the theme is down a lot beforehand. I don't know. Do you guys think they're getting better like the class and spectries were?
I think the average quality of the more recently revealed ones has been higher than the first few, yeah. But it's hard to say if that's a case of like those were made later, or I guess maybe they've had time to like implement some learnings from the reception of the first few. Maybe these are just the ones that got more cook time as well, the ones that were ready later, and so that leads to them being better because it's been such a short time, right? Like, it's still only been a month and a half since the first reveals of any hero talent trees, right? So it's unlike the Dragonflight ones where like the oldest ones are a year or two older than the newest ones now.
Well, alpha's next month too, right?
Probably, yeah.
Like they on the, at least on the roadmap, it says 10.2.6, and then it's like alpha and beta, and then it's season 4. And I think season 4 will be like early May, maybe like somewhere around in May. So I mean, this should be coming out next month, so we'll know. But we kind of got a little bit of a tangent. You said yours was favorite was Ryder, and Dorki's was Druid of the Claw. I'm a big fan of Ryder. Ryder for me though, there's one thing. So the theme is like not even a 10 out of 10. Like it is the best theme by far. Like I think people are going to play the expansion because Rider of the Apocalypse exists. That's how good I think Rider of the Apocalypse is. That being said, they spent half of that tree just describing what those horsemen are going to do that could have just been in the original tooltip. So I feel like there's a lot of dead nodes. But it all comes together at the end when they're like coming out all at once. But then it's also making them a lot more cooldown reliant. But then, well, as if Unholy already isn't. And then Frost is getting it on a shorter cooldown, so they'll have the 4 horsemen out more often. But it's based on an AoE thing you might have to pick in your tree. That's that they currently don't take, right? But then again, maybe the trees look totally different. But I definitely, Rider is just the theme alone. It just couldn't be bad. Impossible. You're one of the 4, or I guess you're the 5th horseman. Crazy.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I have a lot of gameplay concerns with the Rider specifically. Like I was looking at it, and it sounded really cool, but at the same time, yeah, I feel like it would probably run into a lot of gameplay issues. And I just remember what I was gonna say earlier. Well, it's just like the whole idea of like you relying on like specific riders to do like really well with, because you would probably have to balance all the riders pretty well. Because since some of them are just like probably gonna be so much better than the other ones, and also there's like the whole aspect of like.
you got them all
like,
during
more
your
grain with
cooldowns,
the
though,
following
right?
D&D. Well, but and also like that's all the other bad part. Like having to, like, it just makes your CD that much stronger, and that's been like a huge problem with Unholy DK. And I'm just like seeing like, oh man, so Unholy DK is just gonna be like an even burstier spec, right? With this whole Rider of the Apocalypse. Since like I'm just imagining you're doing your opener with army and PI and all that stuff, and you're probably just gonna like do extremely high damage. And afterwards, you're probably just gonna do like absolutely no damage, right? Because that's how else would you balance it?
That is I think, a very fair concern with the way that, because it is the most cooldowny spec of all the hero talents we've seen so far, for sure.
And it's probably the most cooldowny spec in the game right now in general. But I don't think you. So them balancing the guys is good, but I also don't know if there's too much of a need to, because you're gonna probably get an even amount of all of them. Like in other hero talents where they have that kind of thing. So I guess like Diabolist is one of them. Like it's mentioned that like I think it was either in the interview or something. They used to do these interviews that they're gonna come out in sequence. It's not like you could roll 5 Trollbanes in a row, right? Like you're gonna get them all. So like I think it's the overall power balancing versus other things is fine. But even if let's just say one is 50% better than the other, you're still gonna get the same amount of those things as anyone else or that you would on a given pull, you know?
Well, yes and no, because I mean, like, obviously, in some situations, you're gonna want X rider versus like a Y rider. At least that's how I would imagine it, and you probably have to like somewhat play around that.
Yeah, I could see
It's
like
hard to say
your-
without like actually looking at the gameplay of it.
Maybe
Like-
the Chains of Ice explosion is huge. Maybe I don't know. That's the only thing.
Yeah, or like procking a Mograine when you're out of D&Ds or something, if you want one, and where you're like, there's probably one that is the best to proc on your like halfway between your armies burst. That,
Yeah, or if you're in like an AoE pull. Or
but I feel like that is
Those are RNG anyway.
Yeah.
Like getting the horseman to spawn outside of your CDs is like it's never going to be at the same time. I don't think that's that as much of a big a deal. But what? Go ahead, Dratnos.
I think as well that an interesting thing with these, like you talked about how there's some nodes that are basically just like fake in the Rite of the Apocalypse tree, right? Because they're just like, and here's what Mograin's gonna do, and like, yeah, okay, I guess before you have that, Mograin just shows up and hits things, and it's like now he has D&D that follows him. But I feel like that's actually kind of fine for hero talent trees. Like if you make a hero talent tree with a capstone and a keystone that just do a boatload of stuff, and then you have some more nodes in there that kind of don't do anything. In theory, that's fine for regular talents as well, and there are some regular talent trees that are balanced that way, right, where you have to take some garbage nodes to get to some good stuff. But there it feels bad because you feel those nodes you're taking and you feel the points you're investing into them and you feel bad about it, right? Like Druid, you're taking 3 nodes, 2 of which do nothing to get your decurse, and that hurts, even though maybe it's balanced and maybe there's reasons why that's good, or maybe that's just not something they considered, which I think is maybe a little bit more likely in that case. But there's other examples of like that in other trees, right? Where it's like, you know, the good stuff is gated behind spending some points and bad stuff. But that actually doesn't matter in hero talents because you're just getting the whole tree anyways. So if all the power of a tree is concentrated into 3 nodes and then there's 7 nodes that don't do anything, unlike in regular talents, I don't actually think you're going to even feel that really. Like we notice that in an analysis of it now, but I don't think that's something that is going to hurt its vibe in the same way that it does in the regular talent trees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
What are your all's least favorite so far? Oracle off the table since it's obviously being reworked.
I think weapon paladin thing.
Yeah,
that one was one where I was reading it and I was kind of like, okay, I don't want this, and I can't think of any player on the like on anywhere on the like hardcore min-maxy to less hardcore like scale. I think it's going to have a pretty low degree of resonance with people kind of across that board. So I feel like that one is a reasonably big miss.
Also,
yeah, I haven't really looked at all of them, but the what'd you call it? The one with the boomkins and the trees. The
Keeper of the Grove. Yeah.
Yeah, that one is
interesting.
so lame. I don't know, I'm just like imagining playing a boomkin and like just like a lot of your power coming from trees. Like, goddamn, I don't think I want that.
yeah, it's like it used to be like a button that was exclusively used to save tanks and like you never think of in an offensive fashion. And then they built their whole. I mean, I actually think it gets universal disapproval, not universal, but definitely disapproval from resto druids too. Like resto druids have kind of been transitioned recently into less power of their own spells and more spawning random trees that heal random targets. And there's a lot of resto druids that are like, I don't even like that. And then they're like doubling down. They're like, okay, we're gonna do this whole tree, which clearly is the more resto druid focused tree. But even resto druids don't really like it. And moonkins, the thing is actually if you take apart theme, I think Keeper of the Grove is actually one of the coolest like power sources you're going to get of any of them. It turns moonkins into having a very strong 1 minute, which changes the perspective of your class entirely. Like that can make your class extremely good, especially in dungeons, especially, I mean, everywhere in PvE and raids, having like a 1 minute, if your class having a 1 minute option or being decently powerful on a shorter CD is so good for carrying small parts of fights.
We've literally seen it with Moonkin before as well. Like that was the entire thing with Fae versus Venthyr in Shadowlands, right? Like, this was the hallmark spec of that of showing that phenomenon.
So I saw that in Reddit, and I'm not really biased towards many specs, and I was reading it and I was like, oh wow, like just playing this, it sounds fun, but it's just gonna feel so bad because you're pressing trees to get this power. It could be anything else, which shows you how important and how cool theme is, because theme does really matter. It's not just a binary power thing. Like this, if you made Keeper of the Grove arcane themed or lunar or something, this would have been like a super insane, awesome, one of the best talent trees. It's purely theme that brings Keeper down. So it's interesting that you rated at the bottom, because I think design wise it's actually close to the top, but it actually is just that lame.
Well, it's also just like trees and pets are so annoying to play with. Like anyone who has played a Moonkin and like had to deal with trees, or even Resto Druids. Like Resto Druids now with trees are like super annoying, or Warlocks too. Like during all of MDI when I'm playing with my team, and like Goop's having to play Warlock. He's just like complaining about like all these like stupid Warlock things he has to deal with, and like pets and stuff. Yeah, like I think it's more about that than anything else. Not necessarily the theme, or not necessarily the power behind it.
I do think the theme and also the animations, we talked on it a little bit, but a huge part of which of these trees are going to be successful is going to be which ones actually have like satisfying animations that
Oh, absolutely.
look cool. Like, and I think as well, like one of the nodes that I think is gotten some of the most positive reception is that one in the warrior tree, which just like you're 5% bigger.
Yeah, you're bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, which is like, I think that's so emblematic of what they should be doing with these things. Like, put some more of that in here. Put some more of like of that flavor in here, and a lot of that could just be the animations as well. Like if the Dark Ranger tree, which I'm pretty unexcited about, gives you a lot of Sylvanas themed stuff on your
It does.
on your on the looks, and if that looks good, I think that's going to make that tree a lot better than my initial read of it was pretty like actually I kind of feel like the hunter trees in general have all been sort of they've been having a mid
not
off.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're having a mid off. Well,
Yeah.
Dark Ranger should make you feel like Sylvanas. When you disengage, you chain, which I imagine will be shadow chains. You chain targets to the ground. And also when you like have a black arrow on a target, it like shoots these undead shadow hounds at them. I feel like that's pretty Sylvanas-y, you know, that's in that
That's
realm.
pretty cool.
It's
Yeah.
gonna and then like your damage just procs random like shadow arrow AoEs. I don't know what that's gonna look like, but I could see yourself feeling like a Dark Ranger, even though I agree with you in that that tree doesn't offer a lot as far as synergy and gameplay. But you know, if you look and feel like Sylvanas with Dark Ranger, that kind of accomplishes its point. And also that's one they can't really miss on. If you're going to rank these on a tier of like what people coming back to the game will want to play, and they read the name of Dark Ranger and it doesn't hit, that's going to really irk people. So they have to hit there. And yeah, the Hunter ones have just been super. Can we talk about the other Hunter one? That's it's not the actual worst tree. Like there's some stuff going on there, but how they made one called Pack Leader that is shared with BM and Survival. This is another one of those trees also where they definitely made this for BM and Survival just exists because they made it about Kill Command, but Kill Command is two totally different things for those specs. How you are not having a ton of pets out or making Stampede good or something, but like how the fantasy of you know, literally leading a pack, that's what it's called, was totally missed. There's nothing in the tree like that. How do you miss that? Like, that's crazy.
It's tough because that's basically just BM, right? Like BM gets Stampede, BM gets like 2 pets. So you're just making a hero talent tree that's like, hey, beasts, right? But like, so I think they were trying to differentiate from that. They were trying to be like, no. This is a different thing than BM, right? Than the fantasy that BM has offered for the last 11 expansions, right? Like we're trying to do something different here.
Well,
but
what
the
is
problem
that? What are they trying to do?
Right, that's the question that they unfortunately have failed to answer, and they've instead kind of just had it do not.
Yeah, but
like,
it's literally called
nothing.
Pack Leader, right?
Yeah,
It's called Pack Leader, and it just has a bunch of random buffs to spells. It's the crazy. I can't believe it when you read it. Yeah,
and it's like, well, it's like, oh, you're not about a lot of pets. You're about your synergy with your pet, and like you're showing them where to attack, and like they're attacking more often, and you're commanding them to do that with Kill Command, which is obviously like an ability that leads the pack to do something. But yeah, I feel like that is a huge candidate for like back to the drawing board. And I agree with you. Like they shouldn't be afraid to make that super like I think they should be willing to move it more towards being just explicitly like a BM thing. And if it means that Serve has like a melee BM vibe when they play Pack Leader, I don't think they should be scared of that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's also, it's weird for Hunter, and people are wondering why Dark Ranger wasn't Survival BM, and I think it's because 95% of Hunters are ranged only, and BM and MM can both choose it, so it's 50% of the option for both of those, and I think that was kind of a casualty of that. What do you guys think are in the, and you mentioned Lightsmith, I didn't give any comment on it. Lightsmith stinks, but the benefit of Lightsmith stinking is they have Templar and Herald of the Sun, and either one of Holy or Prop Paladin can play one of those things, and both of those are like in my top 4 coolest and most like fun to play ones that they've released. What do you guys think? Not as bad, but what are ones where it falls below the line of like they need to start over with this? Like Oracle's already, they've admitted that, but would you guys put Lightsmith? Would you put Pack Leader? Would you put those in that, like, not just make it better, but like start over territory?
I would, I think. I think those three would be I think they would be the only occupants of the rework tier for me so far. I'm trying to remember.
Would you put Keeper of the Grove there?
I think Keeper.
Yeah, I feel like it should. It should be Keeper of the Grove for sure. I mean, like,
Okay.
I think the idea of like what we're talking about, them having stronger 1 minutes and like being the Keeper of the Grove is cool as hell, but maybe like change something with the trees. I don't know what it could be exactly. I mean, I guess that's not changing the entire
I mean,
tree,
if you
right?
want it to not be about trees, they definitely need to remake the whole thing. That's
Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it has to go. I think.
But what are they? But that's a practical. They're not going to do that, right? Is anyone else think? Like, I think you can save those other ones. They literally called it Keeper of the Grove. It makes sense. There are thematic things between Resto and Moonkin. I feel like there is a 0% chance that they abandon trees at this point. But maybe they should.
I mean, especially because they like added Grove Guardians in 10.2. I think pretty clearly because they knew they were going to do this with Resto in 11.0. I don't know. I mean, I would say it's never too late to change their minds, but I do think that Keeper isn't like so egregiously bad that they're not going to get enough feedback about it like they did about Oracle, where they're going to really hit the brakes on it and go back to the drawing board. I think they could though. Like I mean, Keeper of the Groves, you've got like Cenarius themes, you've got Dryad themes and stuff that you could lean into that aren't. I mean, you've literally got like you could go into sort of a Cenarius-y dream state kind of direction as well. Like historically, they're going back to TBC and stuff. Dream State Druid was this like hybrid between Balance and Resto that got a lot of play back then. That you could yoink some of that identity. So
that sounds great.
I don't know. I think there is room there for rework, but I agree with you that one they're more committed to than they are to Pack Leader and Oracle and Lightsmith and stuff.
What about Trickster?
Trickster's an interesting one because like fainting offensively is viscerally painful to a lot of good rogues, right? Like you're just looking at it and you're like, that does not sound like my defensive agency being turned into something I'm obligated to do for offense has been, I think, a complaint that has been leveled at a few different things they've done over the past few expansions. And I always agree with that when I'm playing those specs as well. So I do... It's tough because like I like the tree aside from that, but I do feel like if I was maining Rogue, I wouldn't be happy to be playing Trickster because like...
Why is there such a big complaint about that? Because like when I'm thinking about having to use defensive stuff offensively, I'm thinking about like, Demon Hunters having to use Blade Dance as part of their core rotation, and it just provides a lot of defensive benefits. I feel like it usually turns out better than that. Like it's better than but it's gooder than bad. That's how I've always seen it. And
yeah, it's like, oh, now I mean,
like,
and if you're a bad
maybe
rogue,
gives a little bit more agency. Yeah.
If you're a bad rogue, like there's a rogue in my guild who doesn't press feint, and now he's gonna have to if he plays Trickster, right? Like, he's literally gaining defensive, right?
Yeah,
like,
he's gaining. Yeah,
that's big. That's
he's
that's
gonna
parse,
tune in
parse of
the
US
most random
Tychondrius.
stray.
Yeah,
I have a bad rogue in my guild.
That's famously potted once on Fyrak, and hearthed out of Echo of Neltharion when he wasn't put in the Windfear group during farm.
Now
so.
it's not a stray; it is a direct hit on this member. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Trickster to that was more than just the. I think you're right that I think most people read Feint for damage and they're immediately like, this thing stinks.
Yeah.
Right. I think the whole thing was really uninspired and not interesting. I don't think there's any cool synergies. I think a lot of actually there was one. I think it's interesting to think about distracting for like damage a little bit was kind of fun. And then there was one, oh man, it's on the left side and it was really cool. Oh yeah, it's your tricks of the trade is permanent.
So I heard a lot about that.
Yeah, you can put tricks on for an hour. You could do some plague borer stuff with that.
There's no way that's staying, man.
That is an ability that as soon as that came out, I was like, okay, this is. I mean, we literally saw what happened in a great push where that existed, and
I don't think that's the intent. The intention is not, let's see what they can do with this. It was, oh, I bet a lot of casual rogue players that don't want to think about pressing tricks every pull want to just have it up on their tank. That it came purely from that place. But you are right that all of us were like, boy, could you do some stuff with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a lot of ideas like this in the past with like what was there? It was like mass spell reflect during Shadowlands beta, and that got scrapped, and there were like a bunch of other like really crazy stuff. In
They
the
put
beginning of this
smoke bomb
expansion,
on Conflict and Strife.
oh yeah, smoke bomb, yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that too, yeah.
And took it
And at the
off.
beginning of this expansion, there was also whenever warriors press shield wall to give their entire party shield wall, that also got removed. So it wouldn't put it past me to like for them to just remove some interaction.
I agree with you that this is pretty reminiscent of those other things that all didn't make it to live in terms of like of all the nodes in these trees, this is going to be the one that they're going to get like 30 notes from people that are like, hey, here's a way that this is like broken, and they'll be like, okay, yeah, we're not going to do this. Or maybe they put like a range on it, right? Like as long as you stay within 50 yards of your tank, your tricks is on them or something. That could maybe do it.
I wonder. So of all the ones that are like have gotten negative community reception, and I feel bad for maybe those just above that line, because it's possible if you feel like you have a mediocre tree, maybe that doesn't meet the requirements in Blizzard's eyes to really give it some extra sauce, and maybe you'll feel like one of those classes that like got one of those later trees, but it was still kind of problematic, but also you weren't the first candidate to get it reworked at the beginning of the expansion, you know? But like I think the only other one I see that didn't at least have one spec that liked it was Farseer. Like Farseer had a lot of people that were kind of upset, but I thought the theme of that was awesome, right? Like Farseer, and like you're just spawning ancestors, and your ancestors kind of do what you do. Like I know pets and guardians aren't fun for gameplay, but at least on the theme side, I think that's fixable and it is cool. The Farseer one. Did you guys look at that
the
one? at all?
only ones I haven't really looked at those in particular, but I do remember the Blood Decay ones not being too inspiring.
Sandlane? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sandlane,
And,
we know they're going to rework D&D to some extent, right? Which I think is going to improve Sandlane pretty much whatever they do
true.
to it, right? Because we didn't know that when we first saw Sandlane.
Yeah, I have it here at the bottom, and I'm pretty sure that's because that was before we knew anything about the D&D, and it was one of those things where like you're just planting your flag, like any in your D&D and gaining a ton of power gameplay and being in your consecrate and being the only way you can survive is like Blizzard has to know that this has to stop. Like, stop this nonsense now.
yeah, but it also doesn't really seem too gameplay altering from what I remember. Like it was not too exciting.
I'm going to read you guys the only specs. Well, just some fun facts real quick. So all of Druid is done. All of Paladin is done. I don't think we've seen a single tree for Shadow Priest or Enhanced Shaman yet. I'm going to read you guys the names of the ones that are coming out. And by the name alone, or any vibe you have, I want you guys to tell me which one of these is going to absolutely rock and which one of them is going to absolutely stink. All right, the names are Soul Harvester for Warlock, Totemic for Shaman, Stormbringer for Shaman, Fatebound for Rogue, Deathstalker for Rogue, Sentinel for Hunter, it's the survival one, Fellscarred for Demon Hunter, Master of Harmony for Monk, Archon and Voidweaver for Priest, and Sunfury, the last mage one.
What was the first one again? I remember thinking that was
Soul Harvester for Warlock.
Okay, Soul Harvester and Stormbringer, I think, are the two that I'm most hyped for out of that list, because Stormbringer was just like, obviously that Ellie Shaman ability, that's so cool. If it's in that kind of space, I think that's going to be sweet. And then Soul Harvester reminds me of, like Legion AF. I get those vibes from it, so just from the name. I don't know what the gameplay is going to be like at all, but those are my guesses that those two are going to own.
What about you, Dorki?
Yeah, that sounds cool as hell. Let's see. Fatebound sounds dumb as hell, but
I also linked you guys the thing to look at
Oh,
so you remember.
TY. Yeah.
Archon sounds badass, but like I can't really imagine that being a thing for Priest. It's probably like,
dude, imagine if they do a
Archon even be?
StarCraft bit where you just have to have two people to be an Archon. That would be so good. They
but
should
like,
release that
what
tree on
even
April
put an
Fools
Archon?
and do that.
Yeah.
Master of Harmony as well. I feel like it's another one where I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, the name is not inspiring a great deal of confidence in me.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they had to make a 2 hero talents per spec, and there turns out there was not quite enough good ideas. Like some of them are just slam dunks, and some of them are like, let's see what they end up coming up with here. I think first of all, I think Sun Fury is going to be amazing, just because the other 2 mage trees are our mage is the main character in this game. Just both
Yeah.
of the ones they've seen so far are incredibly strong and very cool. And I actually wonder if it was a chicken before the egg thing. Is the reason that mages get great content, it's a little bit of a tangent, is because they give better feedback than some other classes. I did a weird thing on my stream after looking at all these, and I looked at the like WoW forums for each individual hero talent that was released. And mages had these theses with individualized points and paragraph headings and bullet points and like positives and negatives, and it was such well constructed, clear, concise feedback. And then you would go to like the Demon Hunter one or like a few of the other specs, and it was actually just mindless nonsense. And it's like I wonder over time if the like even though you're giving the same feedback, I wonder if that actually leads to your class getting designed better or your grievances being more clearly communicated. Is there a mage gap IRL? Is basically what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting
100%
hypothesis.
of it,
I have
yeah.
no take. You think so, Dorky?
I mean, from what I've seen, the mage is a much more collective compared to
So true.
most other. Yeah, because like if you think about druids, right? The druids kind of like all over the place, right? You've got like the boomies; they have their own little.
They all hate
section,
each
and-
other. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the bears are just like they're just bears, and there's just a couple of them. You know, like they were all super distinct, whereas like the mage is like a collective group, and
Yeah, they are a squad.
they think together, they work together, and they've sort of like had this whole community together for the longest time. I mean, you see it in like streamers too, right? Like all the mages are kind of just like in their own little cluster, clique, whatever you want to call it. Whereas like all these other specs or classes, they're not as well put together, and I think that's a large reason why you see so much feedback from mages at all times.
I do.
Go ahead, Dratnos.
No, yeah, no, I got a tangent. So you do
Oh,
mages
okay.
and then I'll
If
go
it's
on my
tangent, yeah.
Yeah.
So I noticed this when I started talking to people about like their class on my stream. Like I would have these talks and just bring people on, and then I would ask my chat who to talk to. And if it's for warrior, it's like, oh, it's this guy. If it's for feral, it's for this guy. If it's this, there's always a guy. With mages, there's like this like high council, and like if you talk to one of them, they're like they're not like it's like, oh, I'm the mage guy. It's like
It's not an individual.
I'm specifically the arcane guy, but I'm not the theory crafter, and I usually play like these points on the tree, and then like there'll be another arcane guy, and then there'll be like a very distinct frost guy. I remember he had a really deep European accent. I don't remember exactly where he was from, and then there's a fire guy. Like it's just like so much more. It's I don't know. It's wild that it's just so much different than all the other ones. All right, what's your tangent?
My tangent is about the Frostfire tree, because I don't know what your guys' takes were reading the first ones, but the first few trees that came out, I was kind of like, and then Frostfire came out, and I was like, whoa. Like,
Me
there
too,
is
yeah.
so much stuff here, right? Like, there's so much gameplay being offered to me in this tree, and I wonder if that is actually gonna, like, I cannot wait for beta to see if that is actually a more fun tree for me than the other ones, because my initial guess is like, yes, I want that. I want more gameplay. But after reading some of the more recent ones, like Shadowpan, Flameshaper, Deathbringer are a lot simpler than Frostfire, but also have me pretty
Good,
excited
but
to play
very
them.
good.
And
Yeah.
I kind of been thinking like, man, maybe Frostfire is actually overcooked
much.
here, right? Like maybe this is one of those things where it's like your friends are coming over for board game night and you bust out that like, you know, complicated European board game or something, and people's eyes glaze over and they don't get what's going on. And this happens to be a lot. And maybe that's what Frostfire made.
Very specific. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe. I kind of feel the same way because Frostfire was so much better than every other one that was released with it that over time they've kind of just in general gotten better, and you have to look. I would need to look back at Frostfire, but I remember reading it and I'm just like, that Frostfire was the first time where I'm like, oh, this can work. Like this hero talent thing's got something. This is nice. I was gonna say something else.
I I took us away from mages on my little talent on Frostfire, or tangent on Frostfire, if that jogs your memory.
Oh, it's kind of another tangent, but if Shadowlands doesn't happen, do you have to pick which hero talent you are at the start of the expansion and you can never change it?
Oh yeah,
Holy, that goes so hard.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I could see like, I could see why they would do that. Not that it's a good thing, but like, I could see exactly why. Because like, if you lock someone into being specifically like a Frostfire mage, then that goes so much harder than just you being able to just like switch around your different uh mages, like your different types of mages.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would go hard. People famously liked that in Shadowlands too, when that was
Yep.
the case. Also, quick shout to Blizzard on making these. I was a little concerned with them adding defensives. Still am just in general in the game, but it's not a hero talent specific problem. I'm glad that there doesn't seem to be any utility strong enough or any defensive strong enough that will be the reason you have to play one of these hero talents other than your other option. And I feel like maybe that was a goal that they had, but when I read some of the initial ones, I'm like, well, what's the other one going to have to compete with this? And pretty universally, it seems like the power level is around the same, where you would never, because the worst thing ever is I want to play Rider of the Apocalypse, but Deathbringer makes me tanky enough to do this fight or gives me some kind of utility that I otherwise wouldn't have, and then now I have to play Deathbringer. Like that's something you really don't want. But I doubt that will happen after reading them. There doesn't seem to be anything that impactful, which is really good.
So I'm glad you brought that up because even though they might not have too much of a difference between the trees, I think they're adding too much. I think there's too much defensiveness. I really don't feel like there should be defensiveness in these trees, aside from like, maybe Druid can have it because like, yeah, Druid's been kind of on the lacking defensiveness, survivability. But I do feel like this could be a problem further down the line. Like
Have you been on the podcast when we talked about this before?
We talked about it with Rookie for sure. I'm pretty sure we've all talked about it together as well.
Like, yeah, it's been brought up so many times. But...
We did it with Growl too. We did it with Growl. We did it both times he wasn't here. We actually
what the hell?
We talked about this, which is why I stopped you. But
why?
I think me and Dratnos are 100% with you. It's not a hero talent problem. There are a lot of problems in the game currently that are being caused by the fact that defensives through talent trees have ramped out of control.
Just too much. Yeah.
Exactly. And now and it's like at the same time,
and it's just you were just adding more to it. That's like the thing. Because like I remember like thinking this because at the beginning of Dragonflight when these trees came out, I was thinking like, oh, like it's so cool that like we get all these, right? And when I'm first looking at the DK tree, I'm like, wow, this is so sick. We get shorter AMS now. We get Will of the Necropolis pretty much for free, and we got like all these like super cool things. But then now that we're at the end of Dragonflight, all these problems are starting to show up that we didn't really think about. At least I didn't think about, right? We're running into the most recent MDI where people are playing 40 DPS. We're seeing huge gaps in survivability in harder content like mythic rating and high keys. It's been such a major problem, and I'm just like imagining adding more defensives to classes. Like at some point, like are we just like phasing out healers entirely at this point? Like when we're 2-3 patches into War Within.
Like think about it like this. If there was 0 defensives in this game, literally nothing, no versatility, no avoidance, and you did not have a single personal cooldown, how would the game challenge you? They would do damage to you, and it would be done over a long period of time because your healer would have to react to that information. And then you have the healer cooldown thing, which also coincidentally at the beginning of this expansion, when everyone gained a bunch of defensives, healers also gained more buttons that make everyone's health go up fast, right? So healer cooldowns being really prominent also means they have to like kind of deal damage to you, and your health bar is going to go down in a more jagged, strong fashion, like really fast, because they have to have the healer cooldowns matter, right? And then you just start adding defensives. And the more, just generally speaking, or I guess simply put, the more defensives you add, especially in quantity, makes Blizzard's only choice to challenge you to start trying to kill you instantly, or at least make your health bar go down faster so all of those defensives can be adequately used when you are being challenged. And just like you mentioned, I'm really concerned with how that looks. I think you've already seen this expansion, how different your health bars look when you are in challenging content compared to how you did versus like in Sludge Fist at the beginning of Shadowlands. It's
Yeah,
such a
it's
dangerous road.
insane.
Yeah.
So I don't know
Yeah.
if you guys had this problem too, because like me specifically, when I was progging Raid Vistir, the only possible way I could have lived Tindral was by having planned personals. This was like never a thing before. Like, is it just me? Am I crazy? Because
No.
there were times where I would only press defensives back then when I was like either dipping low or like if our healers didn't have CDs up or
It
something.
would be
But like,
reactive or improvised. It
yeah, it would
wouldn't,
be
yeah.
yeah. But now like the only possible way I live specific, what do you call that mechanic? Like the starfall thing when you go.
Falling
Falling
I
Star.
think it
Star.
was like the
Yeah.
star. Yeah, yeah. Like the only way you would live like specific overlaps with like falling stars and the roots were by having defensives, and that just like blew my mind. It's never happened before. I never had to play like that as a DPS in raid.
But
Yeah.
go ahead, Dratnos.
I mean, that's always been like the best way to play it, but it hasn't been required for guilds so far down from the top as it is this expansion. Like that is I think, absolutely symptomatic of this problem we're talking about.
I think it also compounds the issue that again, when they're like the last couple fights are meant to challenge us initially, and then they nerf over time, and you gain gear to make them more realistic for everyone at some level. What we at the top level are very good at specific things, and it doesn't ramp down linearly with guild skill. Like for example, doing damage and doing healing is actually something that a lot of people are pretty good at. There are people in guilds that do really, really, really good damage, right? There are a few specific things that like at a world first level guild, a top 10 guild will do that is just completely unrecognizably different than a world 200 guild. And that are things like planning personals, being consistent with their usage, and making sure that assignments are not missed, and that kind of falls under the personal thing. So as like that's basically, if you're going to try to challenge us with that, that's the exact kind of thing that like no matter how many times you nerf the boss is going to be so hard for people later on, and when you saw a lot of the same stuff. And yeah, I don't know. You mentioned improvising your cooldowns. Like that should be. You can make really challenging content where you see yourself going low at a different time per pull and decide that's when you want to use your defensive. And that is not how the game is made right now. And I am also concerned that
Yep.
the direction is going the wrong way.
I will
Yeah,
say,
it's like if your healer's ever lacking healing, then it's like, all right, you play around that. But now
Yep.
it's like you have to have something, whether it's a healer, a DR, or like an external, or your own defensive CD.
I do like the defensives they put in the hero talent trees, though. Like, I feel like most of them are kind of cool. They like either enhance the cooldown, usually in a good way, right? Like they add value to a medium value defensive to make it better or fill in a weakness it has, or they gave you some medium passive defense. So if I was in charge, I wouldn't be like removing them from the hero talent trees. I would be gutting the core trees and like taking out half the defenses from those rather than the
Yeah.
hero talent trees.
And maybe they've done that. Maybe, and that would be smart. Maybe they've done that, but I also doubt it.
Yeah, I agree. That's not likely to be what they've done.
Yeah.
But that's what I would do if I was doing that.
Yeah, because like it's mostly about the amount of personal defensives rather than just about the total amount of defensives in the game. Because it'd be fine if you just like allocated more of it to say like if a tank and healer or whatever. But right now, if there's too much personal defensiveness, which is
Yeah.
leading to all these problems.
It's ruined healing the whole expansion too. Like Blizzards have had to figure out this like, oh, do we like nerf healers and buff their numbers? Like, why do you think that randomly happened in Dragonflight? The increase of healer cooldowns and the increase in defensiveness means that they can't just do damage to you over 10 seconds and challenge you. Like that, any healer just presses one of the extra 3 buttons they have this expansion, and that isn't a problem. They have to try to kill you instantly, and that's just getting so old. And it's
It's
in
like
all
PvP
content.
actually. Yeah, it's kind of like a chore. But yeah, it's like PvP. It's the boss uses X mechanic, and then you have to deal with X mechanic by creating a personal CD against it. And yeah, it's actually funny we're talking about this because I was watching Growl stream. He's been playing Elden Ring, and like some chatter comes into his chat. He's like, "Yo, Growl, how do I heal this one boss, Archmage Soul, the guy in Everbloom?" And it's like, buddy, there's no advice on how to heal this boss. Like you don't. You just press your healing CDs, and like there's only so much you can do. The only way you possibly live that fight is by having your team rotate their defensives properly, right? But like that's not the answer that guy wants to hear because chances are that guy's probably just like
playing with a
pugging,
group
like
that
a
isn't doing that.
Yeah, like he's just pugging like a 26 tyrannical key, and it's like what the fuck you want him to do? Just like tell his teammates in a pug key to like
Use your
press the
defenses.
defensives at a specific time. Yeah, and it's not just as simple as use your defensives too, because using your defensives, then what happens when you're out of defensives? Well, you're just dead, right? So it's about like having CDs planned out, and it's like such a big problem because Growl was actually playing with Tettles and like some other dudes too. They were doing like pretty moderately high keys, like 29s, 30s, and normally it would go well by just like everyone playing good. But because they don't play together often, they don't have like set CDs planned out and like everything that you would normally do with a static group, like the same way as raiding, right? Like in a raid, you're not going to be able to just take 20 extremely good players and just YOLO them into a raid. You're going to have somewhat of planning in every single one of these high-end content now, which is like such a big problem. And it's just become extremely tedious. You can't just like
Well, because like the whole thing with healer used to be like, oh my god, I'm a good healer. Like I can react to these health bars and like I can understand the incoming damage patterns to some extent, and I can see who's reacting to defensives, and I can make like land a good heal on somebody. And that element of being a good healer has been severely diminished by the fact that so much of the check on Soul, like you said, has everybody press the defensive, right? Like, or have people screwed up pressing the defensives wrongly.
When healers used to just heal a group, it was their initial kit, like think of a Resto Druid, like them keeping their group hotted and having good like wild growths and stuff was enough for them to heal through any reasonable amount of damage. And cooldowns were used, and there was less of them, as like almost if something went wrong, or maybe you would plan it at like a very, very hard part of the dungeon. And now the script has been flipped. Now it is you binary need to have X cooldown for this thing or your whole group is dead. And it's been like that for this whole expansion. There's wonderful, wonderful videos about this that Thune has one of them where it shows the raid frame difference between Shadowlands and now, and obviously back in BFA. And it is, I've been beating this like a drum recently. I'm gonna keep bringing it up all the time until they address it, because I think we are heading into meme territory. And it's also it's just a gap increaser. Like there are certain things that the best players in the game are really good at. Like we left a tier thinking that Devastation was the tankiest class in the game because that was our experience. We literally made them do everything and they couldn't die. And then you look at Warcraft Log's death statistics and they're number one, right? Because every bit of their defensiveness required good uses of proactive cooldowns. There's a huge difference between how that is handled at a high level versus a mid or low level. And that is currently where that divide is there. It's increasing that gap by designing the game this way. So I think it needs to be looked at real bad.
It's not something you can improvise either. That's the worst part. It's something that has to be.
It's too late if you're not already
prepared
ready for
and
it.
planned ahead of time, right?
Yeah, that used to be like the thing about like Disc Priest, right? You tell somebody like, hey, you want to play Disc Priest, like you should know if you aren't prepared and you don't know the incoming damage, it's going to be too late. People are going to be low and you're not going to have ramped and they're going to die, right? And now that's just true for every healer, right? Like every single healer in the game is like, you need to know what the incoming damage is, and not only do you need to plan your cooldowns, you need to make sure your group has planned their cooldowns to live it. And I think that is a dangerous road. So I agree. I think we will probably. I suspect this will be one of the things we talk about every couple episodes. So
yep. Oh yeah.
Don't want to spend too much time on it.
An entire episode on this.
Yeah.
We could spend multiple episodes on this. We need to we need to make our podcast. It would be much more insufferable for the viewers, but we need to make our podcast like Lepen used to tweet about removing that one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where like every single week we like just title our podcast something different, but then you click on it and you're like, oh, just kidding. We're going to talk about defensives again because they haven't changed it.
Yeah. Podcasting every week until they fix defensives. Week 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could definitely see it. All right, so I think we're chilling. We kind of
Let's meander into the Patreon question this week, which comes from Bagel, or Bagel, as some people I've learned to pronounce that word. That says, we were all once newbie civilians during our WoW careers. This, of course, leads to moments of misunderstandings and making mistakes that any seasoned super civilian would laugh at. Do any of you have a time in your WoW career that stands out that makes you look back and just shake your head? I'll go first. I started playing WoW in BFA, absolute toddler, I know. The purchase of the expansion came with a character boost, so I slapped that on a Warlock and rolled Affliction because it was good in Raid, in quotes. I watched a couple of beginner guides and learned that Agony had to stack to 20 to deal its full damage. So there I was in normal BFA dungeons, manually spamming Agony 20 times on every mob, not understanding why I looked awful on details.
That's a good one.
Wow.
Yeah. This reminds me of something that, not my embarrassing mistake, but my guildmaster actually, back in Castle Nathria PTR testing, they changed how UA worked on Sable Affliction so that it could only be on one target instead of before where you could have it on every target. And he didn't get the memo, so we were on Huntsman Altamore testing, and he was just casting UA on like all the dogs and the boss, and just, you know, he would target one and be like, oh, that doesn't have UA on it, cast UA. So he had like 3 times the UA cast of our other Warlock, and it was just jumping it around between the two of them.
Man, I really have to think about this. There definitely is one, for sure. Everyone has this. I mean, when you're a noob at WoW, you're just so lost.
Yeah.
Oh, I have one actually. I leveled as a casual in Wrath of the Lich King, and I didn't play like a ton until Cataclysm, but I leveled as a hunter, and I played. They used to have mana, and there was like an aspect that you sat in to regain mana. Do you know what that's called? Aspect of the Viper, I want to say.
Sounds right. Yeah.
Aspect of the, let me Google this real quick. Aspect of the Viper. I'm pretty sure this is true. I'm like unlocking a memory as we speak. That's it. Yeah. Okay. So and apparently you're supposed to be in like Aspect of the Hawk maybe or something to do damage. And I leveled the entire way in Aspect of the Viper. I did not spec out of it one time. And as far as I could tell, that was a significant damage loss when I eventually found that out and then swapped the other one and I just like doubled my damage. So that's mine.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any particular if I can remember, but I do remember back when I used to only PvP in Warlords of Draenor, I had like no concept of PvE, and I didn't even know that Flame Shock would like increase the damage of my Lava Burst. Like I just used to put up lava or Flame Shocks just to like, you know, do damage because like, oh yeah, it gives me Lava Burst procs and I'll just press it. And when I used to PvE back then, I used to just like press whatever did big damage. It was like, all right, like Lava Burst does a lot of damage, so I just press that, right? I didn't have any concept of like always be casting and like, you know, making every GCD efficient or like understanding like what things you need to keep up. I just pressed whatever did big damage, which I'd imagine that's how a lot of people play. And I guess like the only other thing really is when I look back at myself not using focus macros, I think that was like such a big thing. Like, man, I don't know how the hell I played back then without focus macros because I used to play a boomy and like I didn't really care about like focus kick or anything. I just like hit my beam, and goddamn, that makes such a big difference using focus macros.
There are so many people who are listening to this right now, especially melee players, and I know they're just like, that's not me, right? Like,
Yeah.
and they definitely don't use focus kicks.
That's not
They're
what's
just,
not
like,
me because
hitting
I
their
can't read.
cast, they're about to have to kick.
Yeah.
I can also vouch for focus kicks though. Focus kicks are okay. I don't know. Would you guys recommend focus kicks on a class with a true melee kick like a pummel
Yeah.
or something
so.
with a?
Yeah,
I literally
definitely.
don't play, or I guess like my monk is, and I do it on my monk and it's not weird. But like for classes like DK and DH where they're melee and they have like a little bit of ranged on it, it's like just you have to have that. It's like a lot harder, I think, on the melee ones because you might have to like strafe in range of the kick, you know. But like for some of the like, there are people who just natty kick. I heard this the other day. You play with someone told me that when Drogoh heals, he doesn't have like
Who'll tell you
mouse
that?
over macros
Yeah,
or
he
click
has
or
no mouse
anything.
over, yup,
He
yup.
natty targets people and then casts on
Yeah.
them.
Oh yeah, here's our story. Yeah, so we had Dazer coaching Drogoh, right? He was just in our private Discord. We're like
Yeah.
doing MDI practice, and he's just watching and giving like advice and stuff. And Dazer's just watching this guy like freaking doing his red paladin rotation, and then like clicking on somebody to like give him a word of glory or like a bop or a sack, and then clicking back on the mob, and
Oh my
and then like
god.
clicking on the other thing to get like his cake, and he's like doing all this like extremely not optimal activity, and Dazer is just like losing his mind internally, but he doesn't
Has he
want to say
fixed
anything
it
'cause he
yet?
don't know. No, he's extremely what's the word? You know how like
Set in his ways.
yeah. Like you know how well what's the phrase with like old dogs can't
Yeah.
learn new tricks or whatever the hell?
Can't teach an old dog
Yeah,
new
he's
tricks. Yeah.
yeah. He's the definition of that. Like he's like using base UI and he doesn't really like change too much. He doesn't like change basically.
Wow.
And yeah, it is
I
not
mean,
good.
that's not like a preference thing. Like that is absolutely suboptimal. Like
You're
there's no
losing so
argument.
much
Like
globals.
you are
Yeah.
losing. You are playing worse on purpose to do that. That's crazy. So yeah, maybe another unintentional stray at all of our viewers who maybe do that as well. That is not intended, but also maybe change that. Do you have a super civilian moment, Dratnos, outside of?
I'll add in a similar one to that vein. If you have a rotational ability that is ground targeted, like Death and Decay, something like that,
Oh yeah.
you got to put that on at cursor. You're
I have mixed opinions
at
on that.
players
There's some
fine
things you
to
shouldn't.
bind
Ring
them
of
both.
Peace, don't do. I think Ring of Peace is important enough where maybe you don't do it, but like almost all of them, Death and Decay, like if you can, I would say 98% of things that are ground targeted at cursor macros will change your life.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I think
also say 'cause,
D&D like Rain of Fire, like you are losing damage if you have something you press that often that you're having to wait for your click to go through because you actually you have to wait until it's off until you're off GCD to then be able to press it and then click like that. Whereas you can spam it if it's at cursor and it will get the lag buffer thing. And yeah, like if you look, you can see it in logs people who have versus don't have it.
Yeah, 100%. But I do feel like there are some situations where like if it's something important, like maybe Shadow Crash, where because there's it's just because of like how the game can be so bad sometimes where like you know how if you try to
The old
put a
ceiling
ground effect.
incident.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
the
yeah,
ceiling,
yeah.
the
Or- and
ceiling
it goes on-
D&D.
And
Oh,
and it goes on like the ceiling or it goes on like some like stupid ass location that you clearly didn't have your cursor on, but because of like how your camera works, it just puts it over there. I've seen that way too many times with like very important abilities like Shadow Crash, and you don't ever want to miss those.
Yeah, that's fair. I have Shadow Crash on that cursor as well, but for some abilities, like when I'm playing Demon Hunter, I have two binds. I've like for Infernal Strike on Vengeance, I have one that's at cursor and one that isn't, so that I can, if I need the precision, I can have it. Obviously, you can't do that on every spec, but Demon Hunter has so few buttons that I was able to have extra binds for it compared to my other specs.
A lot of people do shift modifiers on those macros. You
Yeah.
can just make it always at cursor, but if you hold a modifier, it will do the reticle.
Although the problem with the ceiling incident stuff is that you don't know when that's about to happen, right? Like, yeah, that's it's always a surprise when it
Yeah.
gets you.
Yeah, my jump is not on cursor, and like some of my
Yeah.
sigils aren't on cursor, like Silent Sigil.
Oh yeah, if you put
Yeah,
like
silence
silent
isn't-
sigil
yeah.
or grip sigil on the roof, you are definitely not feeling
Yeah, and
good.
especially if it's like your stop coming up, it's like, oh, like I gotta hit the silence, and then it's like, oh wait, no, my silence missing, and your just entire party wipes because of it, which is like extremely not good.
Yeah, I think there's some like Shadow Crash or whatever where it's preference. Some like Death and Decay and Rain of Fire where you gotta have that on at cursor. And then there's some like Sigil of Silence where you should probably not have that by default at cursor because usually you want the precision over the extra half second or third of a second or whatever. Yeah, I don't really have any super civilian moments I can think of remembering back though. I mean, I started playing. I'm sure I made a lot of dumb mistakes, but it was so long
when
ago.
you started playing, everyone was a
Yeah.
super civilian, right? So like what you were doing was normal and everyone else did it, so you don't even think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we started later. I can't stop thinking about the Drogoh thing. I can't believe he does that. That is insane. I can't believe someone
FBI
who...
player, by the way.
Yeah, I can't believe that.
Yeah. Well,
I guess like the only thing I can think about aside from this is not too long ago, like maybe like BMFA, I used to only think about overall damage, and my perception has changed so much over like the two expansions or so, where like I didn't realize how big of a difference specific types of damage might matter. Like sometimes the overall damage just literally doesn't matter.
100%.
But yeah, I used to care too much about overall. That's all.
Yeah, I think what you do is, or I've seen you do, is you have your details and you filter out certain mobs that you feel like are not relevant towards progressing the key, and it like shows you the damage that people are doing that actually matter versus the overall that you would normally see it. And then I think you were you were in a dungeon and some rep paladin got exposed. Like some rep paladin in like a high key was like popped his cooldowns and was just divine storming the little blobs around the dragons in front of the Galakron's Fall third boss. But on Dorki's details, it showed him doing like 50k DPS because he wasn't hitting the things that actually mattered.
Yo, he actually joined my guild now. He's my guildie now.
Oh, that's crazy. That's almost like well, Spen is no longer in our guild, but he was the guy who I don't know if anyone will remember this.
I know this lore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So during the
remember.
race in Eternal Palace, we had some viewer. This is the only time this has ever happened for either of our guild. But this guy joins our run, and we get a font of power to drop, and it was for Lip. And then this viewer requested trade, and just screamed "Go Method." It's Echo now, but Method at the time. They just screamed "Go Method" and then took the trinket and left. Like it was like an agent of chaos in there to like take our gear away. And then that guy years later actually ended up joining Liquid.
Yeah, that was a wild story. I remember hearing about that, and then I remember him like joining Liquid and being like, "Oh my god, that is a."
He joined BDG ahead of time,
Uh-huh.
like before that, and I remember hearing about it, and I'm like, that little shit, like how the, and then like I mentioned it on my stream, and then like I checked after my stream, and I had a DM from him, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I was a stupid kid." It's like, okay, everyone can relate to that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
he's
dude. You
super
got to
young.
remember in this game as well. Like, people are kids half the time. That like, especially if you think back to like Legion or WoD or whatever. Like half the people playing now were literally kids back then. So
But even now, he's like super young. I don't even know how old
Yeah.
he is. He's like 20 or some shit.
early 20s, I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just like all of us, we're also all in our early 20s.
that's me.
Yeah,
yeah.
yep.
I'm in my early 20s for another 2 months, and then I'm in my early 30s. Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, how does that work?
yeah.
Wait,
We
isn't your
gotta-
birthday soon too, Dorky?
Yeah, but I don't want to think about it.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
I'm already the age you're gonna turn. It's fine. The water is
Yep.
great.
all right. Well, join us next week for an episode from the retirement home. We'll be back then. Hope you've all enjoyed this one. We'll catch you next
Yep.
time.
Yep, Poddy, see you later. Oh,
Oh,
wait.
actually, wait, yeah.
We gotta talk to them. We gotta talk to them before we go. They might have already tuned out, but maybe they didn't.
Yeah,
we got this
a couple
back in
things.
earlier.
This I forgot about this. I forgot. I mentioned that we were going to talk about this before we started recording, and then I forgot to bring it up at all. But a couple of logistical notes that maybe Frank will even add this near the start or something of the podcast potentially. But we are looking at potentially changing the release date of this podcast to maybe something like Friday, so that we can better record as news is coming out instead of right before news is coming out, which we've kind of had to do a little bit the last few weeks with the release schedule. It's kind of been awkward. We've been like recording, Sundays and Mondays, and then like Tuesdays and Wednesdays they've been releasing shit, and we've been like, this is kind of awkward.
Yep.
So that's something we're looking at. Let us know, I guess, if you're somebody who's like, I love the fact this comes out on Monday, so I can listen to 10 minutes of it on my commute every morning for the whole week or something. Like, let us know if that's you, and maybe we'll reconsider that. But that's something we're looking at doing. The other thing we're looking at doing is potentially the name PoddyC. Much as it epitomizes a lot of our kind of style, is a frequent point of constructive criticism that we've gotten from various people since the start. But why we're bringing it back up now is that we're
haters.
considering, the haters. So basically, if you think it's a bad name, we don't want you. And
The ops.
yeah.
As
No,
they're
but-
called. Yeah.
we're thinking of maybe actually changing it, and then because we're thinking like doing some merch and stuff and that kind of thing. And so we figure if we're gonna make that decision, we should do it sooner rather than
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, I mean-
this is a point of no return, right? Like,
Yeah.
like this clear. Like when we started this, we are like, we'll try it out. This clearly works. We're gonna keep doing this, and we're gonna have to make that choice. Like, do we want this to be 5 years from now? Do we want this to be called the PoddyC, right? So we might just some suggestions, and also I guess we want like, what would we call it? Maybe we
Yeah,
could
if you
get
got a
some-
good podcast name, throw it in the comments or send it to us. Whatever.
Ooh, or in the Discord or something.
Yeah, absolutely. We are I'm not saying we will, but we are thinking about that. We're gonna make a decision about whether or not to do that at some point soon. So
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, I mean, this
So-
is kind of just our vibe, but actually, yeah.
Yeah.
We can jump in
Poddy, see you later. Yeah.
there.
It's such a stupid saying.
It's
so
iconic.
good. I fucking
Good
love
one.
it.